pretty easy to find. It's all over the internet now. Just search for it. So anyway, that's how I got into it. And I don't know how many people have been using Zoom and how many teachers. That's really what I can talk to is teaching. My main focus has been just retaining my students that I have now. I haven't done a lot of marketing yet. I'm hoping to. I haven't really done haven't used online for performance. I've seen other artists do that, and I'm interested to hear how that works and what are some things there, because that was a good chunk of my income is performing on the weekends and during the week. But my main teaching source has gone pretty much uninterrupted so far. So just a little bit of my experiences with Zoom. I started out scheduling every lesson as a separate session, which you can do on the basic Zoom, so you don't have to pay anything for that. That got to be a little cumbersome, so right now I've set it up so I basically have one long meeting every day, and I enabled what's called a waiting room that I can see when a student is waiting. So it's just like I'm sitting in the same room in virtual, reality, and I can exit one student and let another student in the room, and that's gone well for me. As far as the best practices with the Zoom, probably the number one thing I would recommend if you're concerned about audio quality, as the musicians would be, is to get an external microphone, because usually the microphone in the computer is not very good. Almost any external microphone is going to be better than that, and that's based on what I've heard. I got a Fifine. It's Fifine. It was an Amazon choice. It was $38, $40, and it seems to work pretty good. There's also headphones. I don't know how many of you are wearing headphones, but what that does is it limits the looping so that you can't hear me coming back out of my speakers from your speakers back and forth. So if at least one of you are wearing headphones, I think that significantly improves the audio quality. Obviously, be in a quiet place, shut the door, try not to have any distractions. Some of the settings you wanna set in the Zoom app are they're set up so that there's some dynamic things that you need to disable. So the Zoom is set up to get rid of background noise, which if you're just talking might be fine. But if you're playing an instrument and you want dynamics, you do not want these settings that really compress the sound and block out settings and things like that. So there's some recommended settings that you go in and change or disable in the Zoom advanced audio settings. I guess the last thing, I've had very few students so far anyway cancel on me. The parents have been really, really appreciative to have this, I think, kind of something to look forward to, give a little bit of sense of normalcy to their situation now, and they're kind of quarantined in. The kids tend to look forward to it. I expect maybe if people become more affected economically, I might have some more, but I'll do my best to offer scholarships to my regular students that I don't want to lose. I am willing to let them continue lessons for free. I do group lessons, so it helps. I can kind of merge them with other groups, so it doesn't have as much of an impact. But so I think I've done pretty good at maintaining. I actually gained back some old students that came back because my schedule is more flexible now. But I would be interested in hearing ideas on marketing, on trying to reach some people that maybe have thought about guitar lessons. Now they're stuck at home. They might be interested in starting music lessons up. It'd be great to reach some of those people, and also some ideas for performing, or maybe some ideas for helping out the venues. I think Andrew and Jim, you guys were involved in a deal down at our wine bar recently, right? I think I saw that, and I would really love to help some of these venues that have employees, and I'm sure their revenue has just gone straight south because of this. So I'd like to see some ideas for helping out others too. So So that's my basic experiences. I guess if someone has questions or anything on my experience, that'd be great.
Great. Thanks so much, Geoff. And the one thing I neglected to say at the beginning is, if it's okay, we're going to try to have everyone who's attending use the Q&A function. There's a little Q&A button towards the bottom of your window. And please feel free to ask any questions there of the panelists, and then we'll kind of wait until everyone's had a chance to speak, because I think a lot of us might answer each other's questions as we go, and then we'll have a joint conversation and Q&A at the end. So thank you so much, Geoff. That's a really good start to the conversation here. Erik, I'd love to turn it over to you now to talk just a little bit about some of your experience with the visual art side of online work.
All right. Howdy. Good to be here. I'm a found object artist and also a musician. So I've actually been doing some of the live cover stream. I forget what it was called, but getting online doing that, so we can talk about that later. But I'm just going to go right into try and share my screen here and show some of the ways that I promote and sell my artwork online. So first off, we have here, what I use is the Square Reader website. So Square lets you create a website for free, and then they take the fees for whatever you sell. And they have recently just upgraded this. So you can actually put in classes as well. So I just put in a kind of a fake class here about doing a dejunked art class on Wednesday, April 8th. No one's signed up yet. That's good or bad. Yeah, you just click on the details there, and then people can click on to attend. There's the amount. And part of my background is I've been selling artwork online, but I've also been doing paint and sip classes. And I'm sure everyone's familiar with that by now. I used to work at Cheers Pablo in Minneapolis, and also a place called the Paint Pub, and it's the 2-hour paint class. So the reason I bring that up is that business would not be available if we didn't have an online platform. So the way that works is you can pick your painting or class online and sign up, much in the same way we're doing this here. And that would be one way to promote yourself. And I'm actually going to be doing an online class with the Brookings Arts Council on April 14th or 16th, I forget. I just talked with Ashley about it. But we're going to be using Zoom. And this is kind of a substitute for a class that everyone was signed up for in, I believe, March. So we have 8 people signed up already, and we're going to promote it online. To Facebook works really well for that, doing an event invite, and people pay before, which is always good, because then you know how many people are going to show up, and you get a captive audience, so to speak. So Square works great. It's free. You can also do your events. And the way that I have sold work online, like I had this one here available, and you can share it directly to Facebook with the link where people can click. And I've had good results sharing the work to different groups. So I'm a member of an assemblage artist, a few different assemblage artist groups. And a few years ago, I put one up and sold it within 5 minutes. I mean, it can happen in 5 minutes, or it can happen in 2 years. You just have to be consistent about posting to the groups. And also, as far as I'm concerned, don't be shy about it. You know, if you're going to drive your Aunt Caroline crazy by posting, 10 times the same artwork. Well, that's her problem. You're trying to get the word out. So, yeah, so posting to Facebook groups. The next thing I have here is this app called Marcel. This is another free site, and this is actually an app. It's called Marcel, spelled just like the artist Marcel Duchamp, and it's free, and it's a great way just to make a website on your phone and have all your artwork together and be able to show it, share it to Instagram, put it in collections. It's very slick. I'll bring my Aunt Caroline in again. She could even do it. It's very simple. So that's another great way just to get the word out there. And one last thing I wanted to show you was Patreon. So this is something that people are using a lot more, and this is a way to generate another kind of income where people can become your patrons, and they actually, once you get enough content on there that people are going to want, they can subscribe to your Patreon for $5 a month or whatever price. You can have different tiered prices to whatever you want to share. A lot of podcasters use this. I just put up a quick post here to check out my Marcel site, and lots of ways to promote. You can check your income. So it's like it's like a website, but it's another way. The money's built in, so people can support you that way. And I think I would guess that's really going to take off here in the next month. And that's really all I have right now. I look forward to some questions.
Great, thanks so much. Really appreciate that, Erik. Real quick, just wanted to clarify one thing before we move on and then do Q&A at the end. You said it was Square, like the kind of like the credit card processing company, not Squarespace, that you were using for the website?
Yes, yeah, two completely different things. That part gets confusing. Squarespace is a good web place to make a website as well, but it costs money. It's just to start out, it's $16 a month. It's pretty slick. I'm kind of on the fence on it. I kind of want to make the plunge because it has a lot of bells and whistles, but I really don't need it. And I wanted to, get this stuff out here to the free stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And so you said they basically subsidize it by the processing fees of any goods you sell.
Yep.
Great.
And Squarespace has that function as well, but like I said, it costs money. And GoDaddy is one that I had used in the past. That also was $15 a month. So I'm going to give the Square Reader, give that my time for a while and see how it works.
Great. Well, thanks again, Erik. We've got a couple of good questions coming in here, and we'll open it up for a little more discussion at the end. But first, just wanted to jump ahead to Molina. I'm really excited to have you with us, and thanks so much for making the time today. And would love to hear a little bit about some of your experiences.
Sure, thanks for having me. Melina Parker. I live in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. My husband and family and I recently moved out here about 3 years ago, so I had to cut back in a lot of the shows that I did. And I too use Square for my work. And one thing that I found when selling your work online, it's important to have good photos. My husband's a videographer, so he was always stressing to me how important that was to make sure that your products look good. So I have light kit, and sometimes I get assistance with the photography. So once the product's done, of course, I do the photography, color corrections, whatever I need to do. watermarking all of my pictures because I've had people steal my content online before and try to pass it off as their work. Just always making sure that you're taking care of yourself in that way. And then, of course, posting. And if you're using social media, I found that hashtags are really helpful. A lot of people follow different hashtags. So if they see your work on this hashtag, they'll be more inclined to follow you. And then staying consistent with your posting. So I might not post new work every day, but I like to post different content. And so I might be promoting other artists on my page, or just trying to create a real sense of community, maybe some jokes here and there, something that keeps people interested and know that what you're about. I also do like behind the scenes videos for things that I'm working on. And I'm in this new time that we find ourselves in, I've been thinking about creating something like a masterclass, learning how to bead or learning how to paint the way I do or quill work. I think that would be really cute. And I was actually thinking about using Patreon to create some of that content. I work with a crow designer named Bethany Yellowtail, who is actually really good at selling most of my work for me. And because she's based in LA, I now have to find a new way to make up for that income. So we're thinking that might help. And of course, as with marketing, it's always good to make sure that you have a good relationship with your clientele. So I ship more than once a week. We do live about 20 minutes from the nearest post office, but we try to make it to the post office 2 to 3 times a week to make sure people are getting their products. And I make sure to include business cards, thank yous, and just to try to keep with the retention. And I think the most important thing that's come out of this is the community that we create and how we support each other, even online. There's a couple of designers that are have bigger names than I do that also share my work, and we all try to help each other get the clients that we want. I'm not sure what else to say. I didn't prepare anything more than that. Just a
Well,
little
that's really fantastic. No, thank you
Right.
so much for all that. I think that we'll come around again as a group to talk. But I in particular, I really liked how you were highlighting both you and Erik highlighting the hashtags, and then for Erik, talking about finding those groups of like-minded people, finding those groups that are likely to already be kind of on your side and interested in what you do, and I think that goes back to Geoff's point earlier about trying to find some additional students that might be interested in guitars. I would suggest starting with those groups that are into music and into guitar-based music. It sounds basic, but it's amazing sometimes how much that really does work much more quickly than I think it would. One quick question that I wanted to ask you, Annie Hatch asked, how do you do your watermarking? Do you just use a normal photo editing app, or do you use a specific app for that?
I use a couple. I use Canva to do a lot of my color correction and editing out some of the blank space and things I don't want in there. And then I actually use an old app called Be Funky. I like using that for my watermarks. It's not specifically for watermarks, but I like the fonts that they have.
Great, yeah. And Canva, I'll be including all this in this shared document with everybody. But Canva has been I've heard of a number of people having good luck with it. It seems to be a good way to. I am not a designer at all. I'm a musician, and so it seems to be a way to help. When I use that, it's it's at least functional when I use Canva. Whereas if I try to pick fonts and design by myself, it's pretty obvious pretty quickly that I'm not a visual person. So great. Well, thank you so much, Molina.
Thank you.
I'd like
Yeah.
to pass it off to Luke Tatge now with the Goodnight Theater Collective. Again, please keep sending in your questions, and we'll have some more kind of open conversation amongst the panelists and with everyone's questions here in just a little bit. Luke has done a number of things in addition to the theater group. But in particular, I was excited to hear a little bit more because they're working on a virtual cabaret with some ticketed performances and being able to share some new performances during this time. So I'll turn it over to Luke.
Yeah, so thanks, Andrew. One of the obstacles that we've kind of had to overcome as a theater company is that our product involves people gathering. So that was sort of a tough pill to swallow right from the jump. It kind of all started with a couple weeks ago, we had to sort of make the tough decision to cancel our sort of flagship show of our current season here in Sioux Falls. We were planning on performing a production of Chicago at the end of April. And unfortunately, we had to cancel that for obvious reasons, like most live entertainment companies have had to do in these next couple months. But we sort of saw it as an opportunity to immediately get right to work and come up with some alternatives. Because really what our product is entertainment. And without the ability to gather, even when it was at one point 50 or less, it was still kind of going to be an issue, even just with a 12-person cast and then a couple of tech people. You're already taking up almost half the allowable amount of people. And then obviously 10 or less becomes almost an impossibility in that regard. We looked for opportunities to keep our fans entertained while we're away, especially since we don't really know how long that's going to be. And kind of a little bit to what Molino is saying, and our marketing is almost entirely digital. We do all of our sales digitally. The problem with the current situation is that our product itself is rendered kind of useless without being able to gather and be in person and live. So selling online has been something that we've been working with for the last 4 seasons, but we kind of had to reinvent the product in our case. So we did some brainstorming, and we really like to deliver a quality product. So the idea of live streaming a performance was the first thing we thought of. And what's nice is that for those of you who are theater people on the call, you may already know this, but a lot of the rights organizations are being relatively flexible about that. Typically, you have to go through a lot of hoops in order to get the rights to live stream a copyrighted show like Chicago, for example. But a lot of the organizations are kind of throwing that rule back out the window a little bit to give you a little more opportunity to do that. So some of the ideas we had initially were to simply partner with, my day job is for an advertising agency here in Sioux Falls. And one of our initial ideas was to partner with an ad agency with some video production capability in order to live stream the performance so we could continue on, since our cast and crew had put in so much work already. But obviously with the 10-person rule, our cast was 12 people, so that wasn't going to work. But the nice thing is a lot of companies here in town, including ours, have talked about the possibility of maybe live streaming, even as scrappily as from our living room, pick a show that's a limited number of people, because a lot of the rights orgs are allowing that to happen a little more easily now. But in the near term, what we kind of decided to do, because we're missing out on this opportunity to deliver something really great for our patrons, was to put together a fully edited on-demand cabaret, rather than trying to live stream 30 different performers and hope that the music and the voices lined up and it didn't all go south the second we went online. Basically, we started promoting a couple days actually after we canceled Chicago, a virtual cabaret. That's sort of our roots in theater here in town, is doing cabarets at the Icon Lounge, usually with just 3 or 4 people, some live singing, some comedy, whatnot. And the nice thing about doing an on-demand pre-recorded cabaret is that we were able to involve essentially all 30 of our guest artists in this performance. Then the obstacle becomes, if you're going to sell tickets to an online performance, you can't use any copyrighted music. So that's another issue with moving from a live venue to moving online, is you have to be really careful about the type of music you're performing, the type of work you're performing, because the rules are completely different, especially when there's money involved. Luckily enough, we have kind of a back catalog of original shows and original songs that we've been sort of sprinkling into our repertoire the last 4 seasons. And so essentially it's almost like a greatest hits of all of the original pieces that we've done over the last 4 years. And we actually just released it this morning. So essentially we sold digital tickets, super affordable, told people, share it if you want to, buy as many or as few tickets as you want. Unlike our usual performances, you can watch it whenever you want, as many times as you want. And for the last week, we've been selling digital tickets. And then at midnight this morning, actually, we released it just through an unlisted YouTube link hosted on our Squarespace website, and sent that private link out to all the ticket buyers. The nice thing about it is an unlisted YouTube video, you have a little more control over it. It's not searchable in YouTube's database. If someone has the link, they're able to watch it. And really, since we don't have a lot of control over that, we almost wink, wink, nudge, nudge, encouraged people to share it if you want. If that's your jam, go ahead. If not, buy 20 tickets if you want to support us. Sort of positioning it as something outside of our regular season, but that would still be fun and entertaining and escapist, even if it wasn't the same experience you're used to getting. And it's been really great. It's been really gratifying to see a lot of people. I mean, it's the Midwest, so the whole honesty is the best policy thing is working really well. People, if they know there are going to be 2 sets of eyes on it, they buy 2 tickets, even though they don't have to. And it's been really great. It's only been a few hours that it's been out, so we're hoping that people enjoy it, and we're leaving it live for the next 5 days. Meanwhile, we sort of saw this up as an opportunity to continue staying top of mind. We're really going to need to get creative. So we sort of masterminded this week of fun, we're calling it, where we're doing some exciting thing every day of the week. One thing that we had planned for Chicago, it being our flagship performance of the season, was to sort of launch our new season for the fall and announce all the titles, because that seems to have the best impact when you're face to face. Unfortunately, that's no longer possible. So we're kind of doing that early, and we're sort of starting the week with this weird, novel digital cabaret, and then ending the week announcing our season live on Facebook through a few different remote people. One thing we're also doing that we haven't really announced yet, but tomorrow we're launching a quasi fundraiser for local theater companies here in town, because really a lot of companies here have had to cancel. So we've developed sort of a merch item, super simple, inexpensive merch item, and we're letting people pay whatever they want for basically I Support Sioux Falls Theater magnet with all the companies' logos on it, and we're going to split the proceeds among the companies that have been affected or have had to cancel and are budgetarily impacted by COVID. So we're just trying to be as scrappy and move as quickly and agilely as we can, and it takes some marketing savvy, but honestly, with a lot of what the other panelists have mentioned, there's really a lot you can do digital marketing wise for rather cheap if you know the right audience and you know how to target. There are a lot of platforms that don't have a super high threshold for budget. Facebook, YouTube, Google, for example, don't really have a minimum threshold like some of the larger platforms like Spotify do. And so you're able to get a lot for very little, and that can come in handy in a time like this for sure.
Great, thanks so much. One quick question before we kind of open it up for a couple of the other questions. This one specifically for Luke. How do you keep tabs on the watch numbers for the audience counts? Are you just doing that through the? I assume that you're doing that through YouTube's built-in analytics, or is there another way you're kind of keeping track of how many eyes are hitting the performance?
Yeah, so we use Squarespace's built-in email marketing platform. So we sent out an email with the private link this morning. So we're able to see open and click rates, obviously, and make assumptions based on that. Beyond that, we, though there are many video platforms, YouTube happens to be one that you can upload an hour-long video and not have to pay an a whole bunch of money. So that's kind of why we selected YouTube. But yeah, there's that general analytics on the back end of YouTube to be able to see who's watched it, how many minutes have they watched on average, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great reminder of I hadn't thought about the email side of it, using either Squarespace or MailChimp. I know both do things like that. That's really interesting. Great. Well, as we kind of just open it up for some general discussion amongst the panelists and some questions, first I wanted to answer a couple of questions that have come in from the audience. One is from Anne, who's asking, is anyone using platforms other than Zoom? Just because they're trying to find some things that are very user-friendly for non-tech audiences. I have a couple of ideas, but I wanted to first throw it out to the rest of the panel. Have any of you used anything beyond Zoom for any of your things, whether it's FaceTime or Facebook videos, anything like that?
Google Hangouts is another one.
Oh yeah, and with Google Hangouts, do you need you'd need to have some sort of a Google account to log in once it's up and running?
Yep. And I would think at this point in humanity, everyone at least has one Google something.
I know, whether we like it or not, it seems like that's the case for sure. I think that Google Hangouts, FaceTime, if everyone is on Apple devices, you can do some video through Facebook Messenger. One thing I've found with FaceTime, if you're trying to do a group chat, is there's no way to focus the video on anyone in particular. So if you do use that with multiple people, it can sometimes get a little disorienting as anytime someone makes noise, it starts to grow their video, and it can get a little annoying. But the nice thing with something like Google Hangouts, Anne, is it does work completely from your browser. You can use Zoom from the browser, but it's much better if you download the app. So I know sometimes that's a little easier for some less tech-savvy people to be able to just do everything kind of built in.
Well,
anyone else having any other good experiences? Yeah, it's amazing. Skype still exists, but I think Zoom has kind of taken over that use case pretty quickly. The other nice thing with Google Hangouts is it's a much higher level of usage before you have to pay. To Geoff's point earlier about Zoom, the free version, I believe, is limited to a meeting of only 40 minutes at a time. And so if you're trying to do either hour-long lessons or multiple lessons in a row, sometimes that can get kind of frustrating. But they do have a variety of, the nice part is only the host has to have a paid app. So if you pay as an educator, Geoff, correct, where none of your students then have to necessarily pay. You pay for your host license and that's enough.
Correct. And one-on-one, I don't think there's limits. I think that's only if there's more than 2 people, I believe.
Oh, great. Okay, that's good to know.
So,
yeah. So for some educators, then the free version may still work okay.
And I have also, just for Zoom, I don't know if it's because I got into kind of, you want to go into the advanced audio if you want to optimize sound, but just I haven't had any I have like 60 students and very few problems. I'm sure many of them are not techie at all. And they've been able to log in, just to the basic, just to be able to see the meeting. If you want to dig in and do things like optimize the audio, then of course you want to click a few more buttons, but the basic program is very user-friendly, I found.
And just one update from Annie Hatch, one of the attendees who's our state folklorist. She mentioned that because of the COVID-19 extra usage with Zoom, they are likely they've suspended the time limit for groups for the free version for the time being. And I think you can find more info on that at the Zoom site to see just how long they've extended it. But I know they've been doing a number of things to help during this time. Great. Then another question on the kind of marketing side of things was from, apologize if I'm saying your name wrong, but from Dion Collar, who asked, she has an existing website that's pretty well established, and she's wondering if anyone has experience with then adding the online store element. She's a kind of multidisciplinary. It looks like she's a photographer, a musician, a writer, and a podcaster. So I think what I might ask is, Dion, if you could let us know exactly which website you're using, we can give you some ideas. But I do know that you can do a number of things. If it's something like WordPress, you can do e-commerce platforms built into the system you're already working with. Otherwise, you can use a lot of these other options and just link to it from your website. You know, you can use the Square free version, the online store, and just when you would link from your main web page, it would just take you outside of your main web page to your web store with a slightly different host name. But that's always very possible. Yes, Dion Kaler. Okay, great. Sorry, I was so close. And you're mentioning here that you use your own WordPress site. I would definitely look into WooCommerce for WordPress. That's kind of the industry standard. But Luke, what do you all use with the Goodnight Theater Collective? Is that a Squarespace site for your commerce? Is that what you had mentioned?
Yeah, we use Squarespace. One thing that I would advise, depending on what your host platform is to double check which processors they work with. Up until recently, Squarespace did not work with Square Reader. Ironically enough, they exclusively worked with Stripe as a financial processor. So that's another thing, is WordPress probably has certain ones that they play well with. So that's probably your first step.
Yep, good, very good points. I know, and with WordPress, the difficult part is the WooCommerce is kind of the industry standard, but it's technically a third-party plugin, and so you're having to go elsewhere, both for a subscription fee and then also just generally speaking for any sort of tech support.
I wanted to just jump in on that.
Yeah.
Most of the time you're going to have to pay an extra fee to integrate the Square Reader with any of the websites, whether it's GoDaddy or WordPress, any of those. So like you said, the best way to do it is to create a link in your website and then make it a separate Square Reader site to sell your work. That's the least expensive way to do it.
Great. That's a great tip.
And a lot of it depends on your hosting platform too, really. The nice thing about Squarespace, and I can't super speak to WordPress because it's been a long time since I've used a WordPress site, but the nice thing about Squarespace is they allow plugins, API calls directly to some of these processors, so that you can still host your inventory through your own site versus sending to an external page. Some of them will allow you to iframe in. So even if you had a Square Reader inventory page, you'd be able to iframe it into a page on your site so that it would still have the same menu navigation, same branding and everything, which is a nice thing for user experience.
Great, thanks. Annie Hatch in the chat here has also mentioned that she's been using GoToMeetings. That was an online service that I forgot to mention earlier. In particular, I think GoToMeetings is really good for intensive screen sharing, as she mentioned in the chat. And that's really exciting that she's actually been able to use it for reviewing film with a filmmaker and an editor that she's currently working with. So sounds like the screen sharing aspect of that must be quite useful. Any other questions from the attendees? Please feel free to keep typing them in the Q&A section, and we'll get to them. One thing I kind of wanted to just jump back to, which we talked about a little bit earlier, but is that kind of finding your community, that idea of both for marketing your goods and your services and expanding your audience, but how do some of the panelists, if anyone would want to jump in, how have you found the best success with kind of seeking out those communities? Do you start with groups you're already involved in? Do you do quite a bit of online research to find other like-minded artists or patrons? Kind of how have you gone about that process?
Well, the way I look at it is I'm sure everyone has experience of jumping down the rabbit hole in the internet anyway. So if you're going to do that, you might as well try to be productive about it and like I think Molina was saying, using hashtags, following the hashtags, commenting on like-minded people's artwork to connect with them that way. Yep, jumping down the rabbit hole is the big first step for me.
Maybe Molina, how did you, two questions for you based on that would be, how did you kind of find some of those hashtags? Because I know that's my difficulty is they're all just a little bit different the way people use them. But then also I wanted to ask you, you've had a fair bit of success with some national press and some different things. Was some of that with that relationship with the seller in Los Angeles that you had originally had, or how have you kind of spread the word of your work that way?
Bethany definitely did help with that. She got me an interview with Design Sponge before they went out of business, and they helped garner more followers that way as well. And then just a friendship I had with someone that I curated throughout the years, actually knows one of the writers from Vogue and introduced him to me and got me in a couple of his articles now, which also helped with garnering more followers. One thing that I found helpful is the people that do buy my work, I try to look at their pages every now and then and see what they're interested in. Like if they're interested in nature or I don't know, certain fashion lines, I'll try to do research and see how I can use other designers' aesthetics in my work, whether it be their color palettes or just how they style their work. And so I try to create hashtags that they would typically follow outside of what I'm doing and put that into my work. What was the other part of the question? I forgot.
Oh, still muted. I always do that. No, I think that covered all the question. That was great.
Okay.
One other question that's come in for you in the chat is from Annie Hatch, just asking, as you've moved and you're in a little bit more of a remote location, what are some problems that you encounter based on that? And are there any local arts groups that have kind of formed to assist each other, or how have you kind of found some of that artistic community in more rural or remote areas?
My nearest neighbor is about a half-mile away, and it's my mom. So there really isn't a community here. There are other people that do similar things, but it's not like we help each other. And that's something that we've been trying to work on, is creating that community here locally. But in Rapid City, Racing Magpie has been very helpful, and we've already had meetings with them, seeing how we can help the local economy. Because like we said, the tourist economy is probably going to take a dump this summer, and so we're trying to figure out those relatives and friends that make most of their money during the summer. How can we help them too? Some of us are more fortunate than others, and that I'm grateful my husband still has a job, so I'm not, working as hard as some of my other artist friends to get this going, but I want to be there to help them as well.
And I do know, I think I see that Peter might be beyond this, so it's great to have you, Peter, from Racing Magpie. I know that they've been doing a number of grid webinars, especially for West River artists, just coming together in community and doing a series of virtual residencies through Racing Magpie to kind of help support artists. And there's also a West River artists group that they've been forming that has had a number of Zoom calls and some kind of community building. And I would urge people to see what they're up to. And then also for those of us that aren't West River, find other groups that are doing things. In particular, I recommend people check to see if they have a local community arts council. South Dakota is pretty unique in that we still have over 30 active community arts councils, including some that have just started in communities like Leola, South Dakota. And, so there's a number of smaller, rural-focused community arts councils. Falkton is another really exciting one, DeSmit. And they often have great resources for area artists. So I definitely encourage people to reach out to them and try to build as much of this community as we can during this time. A couple of other things I wanted to point out from the chat. China Lockett from South Dakota Public Broadcasting jumped on. She's been doing a series of some articles about some struggling artists and how things are going during this pandemic. And she would love to have a chance to talk to anyone about their work and their experience. And so you can reach out to her via her Facebook or through public broadcasting. And then Geoff, Jim Spears, asked if you kind of see growing your studio with more of these online students, for instance, expanding to students outside of the region, trying to find students that maybe wouldn't have come to your house or to where you teach from at Augie otherwise. Is that something you kind of see as a possibility?
I definitely see it as a possibility. At this time, with 60 students, I'm pretty busy. And I am definitely anticipating going back to face-to-face lessons, which for me is much preferable. But I think the experience of doing online lessons and just getting comfortable with it, that definitely has opened the door to maybe do some more of that in the future. I think my main focus is going to be locally because it keeps me busy and I enjoy that. But I'm and I've gotten ideas just sitting here listening to you guys too of maybe doing some online group lessons or some things and promote it somehow so that it would obviously be open to anybody, anywhere, not just Sioux Falls people, but.
Great. Well, just as we're getting close to wrapping up here, I just wanted to mention, I've put this in the chat and then I'll have a slide up quickly here with a link to our webinars webpage, but we do have a, this Google document that we've been constructing. I'll be adding a number of the notes from today and have also been working on researching a number of things in advance. One thing to note is there are also some things on there for selling your music online, some resources like Bandcamp and DistroKid, which are some great ways to distribute your music online and beyond just uploading to Spotify in different ways. And please feel free to email me with any ideas of things you want included. Also, please reach out to any of us at Arts South Dakota anytime, but especially if you have any ideas for future webinars you'd like to see, future professional development opportunities, especially in these times when we're not able to necessarily get together quite as easily as we could otherwise. And we'd love to hear from you. And everyone, please stay safe and stay well. And we're just so happy to have everyone here today. Thank you so much to our panelists. We'll also be including some of their contact and website info on this Google document so that you can see their work and reach out to them with any questions you might have. And we really appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks. And we'll see everyone very soon. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.